The journey is conversations with ordinary people about stories of transformation and how we may have had setbacks in our life and how we persevered through those, how we've learned from those obstacles, and how they've maybe helped us on our path today. Well, welcome to the journey. My name is Kevin Polkey, and I am the host of the journey. And today we have a special guest, Michelle McCabe-Shafer. Welcome, Michelle, to the journey.
Thank you, Kevin. It's nice to be here.
So that last name may sound familiar for some of you. Michelle's husband Adam was on the show probably about a year ago, maybe a little bit less than a year and a half ago, and he was talking about his work with blue lights. And so Michelle and I met. End of 2018, as we were just kind of reminiscing about that. And uh, Michelle's been working as a therapist at KP Counseling since that time period and continues and has a new position now as clinical director. So she's going to be taking over for Christina Warden's position. So, well,
Mhm.
Michelle, welcome to the journey. So, one of the questions we always start with is when you have the opportunity to have fun, what does Michelle do for fun?
So I really enjoy reading. I actually hit my goal for the year, which was 15 books, and I'm surpassed that because I've had some downtime this year. But I enjoy reading. I like to hang out with my three kids and my husband. We go to the park, we take some walks, right? We try to be active when I can. I like to exercise. I've been a little limited this year, but I like to run. I like to lift. Um, I like traveling when I get to go and explore new places.
So, if we were going to take a glimpse at your library of books,
Oh,
what are we going to see? What are the types of books that you read?
I'm really a murder mystery kind of girl.
Okay.
So I really enjoy reading murder mysteries and trying to solve the puzzle.
Okay. And how did you get started on that? Who got you started on the murder mysteries?
My aunt actually, she likes to read murder mysteries as well. And then I remember her, I don't know that this is considered murder mystery though, but she turned me on to Harry Potter, right, when I was probably in middle school. And then I read all of those and then I just kind of spanned into fantasy, murder mystery realm.
Gotcha. Yeah, my son-in-law has read all the Harry Potters and I have never read any of the Harry Potters or watched any of the movies. So I know that
Mhm.
is something that Diane and I need to do, but neither one of them have read or it just must have been our kids must have just been at that space of time where it was in between. I don't really know, but for some reason, the four of us never really we missed that one, and so we'll have to maybe go back and revisit that. So I know that you've been a therapist and a counselor
Mhm.
for over 10 years. Tell us,
Mhm.
yeah, tell us a little bit. How'd you come about being because you're an actually licensed marriage and family therapist and
Mhm.
addiction counselor. How did that all come about?
So my senior year of high school, right, I had wanted to be a lawyer actually up until that point. And then for whatever reason, my senior year of high school decided that I didn't think that was actually a good fit. And so I spent a little time, probably a little frantic, right? Because it's senior year and you have to figure out what you're doing for your whole life, or that's the thought. And so I thought of a couple different things. I like murder mysteries, right? So I had originally thought maybe I would like to do crime scene stuff, and then that was very short lived. And when I actually went to my preview at the school that I was going to be going to, I decided to do psychology because I actually find how people work and how minds work interesting. And and then the rest was kind of history because I really loved it and loved learning all the things that I was learning and decided I wanted to do counseling and try to help people as I was learning all of that. And so then I went to graduate school and got my master's degree.
Okay. Well, and I could see like the psychology behind the murder mysteries, and like you said, trying to figure out the story. In some ways, that's kind of what we're doing when we're counseling, right?
Mhm.
Trying to help someone else kind of figure out what is going on in their world, and and really helping them kind of piece together. We don't, as we talk about it, we don't actually fix or solve someone else's problem. We help guide them
Mhm.
to find their own solutions. So,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
and Michelle, growing up, you grew up in did you grow up in the Rockford area?
I did not. No, I am from a small town, still in Illinois, but it is called Manteno, and most people have no idea where it is. But it is kind of by Bradley, Bourbonnais, Kankakee area. So if you were a Bears fan back in the day, the Bourbonnais housed the training camp for a little bit for the Chicago Bears.
Oh yes, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, gotcha. And then what led you to how did you get to Rockford? How did Rockford come about?
Well, I went to NIU for my master's degree, so I was out in DeKalb, and then my husband Adam is a year above me in school, and he had gotten a job because he also went to NIU, and he had gotten a job in Rockford,
Gotcha.
and then we just ended up staying.
Okay. Well, good deal. Well, I'm glad you did. So well, today is we're at the beginning of October, and like many months they designate uh a month for different to try to raise awareness, and the month of October has been designated as Breast Cancer Awareness Month,
Mhm.
and I know that is something that you have been very passionate about, and so yeah, tell us a little bit about why how has this come to be something that you're passionate about, and yeah, tell us a little bit about what you've learned regarding that.
Mhm. So I was March of this year. I had to get a diagnostic mammogram and a diagnostic ultrasound because of some abnormalities that were found when I talked with my primary care doctor. And I am not the age to get a regular screening mammogram. I'm not old enough. So that wasn't something that I had to do yet. But I ended up getting a diagnostic mammogram and ultrasound, and the results came back. Well, the results came back that I had to get a biopsy. And so then when I got my biopsy results, it came back that I had cancer cells. And that then opened the door to all of these things, right? Then I got the phone call that I had breast cancer, and then was told I was going to meet with a breast surgeon, a plastic surgeon, an oncologist. I was going to do genetic testing. There were all these people that now I was going to have all these conversations with and all of these appointments with. And it went pretty quickly, right? That part went very quickly. I was seeing a bunch of different providers within the first, I think, 3 weeks. I saw all of them, right? And started coming up with whatever the game plan was going to be. And something that I thought was interesting is I chose to share that a bit more publicly in my personal social media account. And I had multiple people reach out to me privately who had said, "Oh, yeah, I went through this too." Or, "Oh, yeah, like I haven't like announced this to a lot of people yet, but I'm going through that." And I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And a lot of these women who are my age, right? They're under 40 and they are also going through that or have.
Okay. So, okay, so March of this year, you
Yes.
had gotten the screening done, got some of the preliminary assessment and testing done. You find out that you have cancer, and how old are you right now, Michelle?
I'm 36 now.
36. Okay, so 35 at the time, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So at 35, mom of three small ones,
Mhm.
and then of course a husband, Adam. Yeah, tell us a little bit about what that initial news is. I mean, yes, we're counselors, marriage and family therapists, social workers, but Yeah, just because we know how to help others, now all of a sudden it's real, right? It's live. So,
Yes.
if you go back to that time period, what was that like when you first got that information?
Terrifying is probably the best word I can think of. The and in that moment, I didn't know anything beyond. I actually read the results myself first because they just populated in my chart, and so I had read them before I'd even spoken to anybody and saw. I don't know what it all meant, right? Because I'm not versed in that, but I saw carcinoma and I knew what carcinoma meant. So I hadn't gotten to speak with anybody yet. I did. I got a hold of Adam and told him that there are cancer cells, like this is cancer, and finally got to talk to somebody, which was the nurse at the women's center who I had done the where I had done the biopsy, and they couldn't tell me a lot either. They just said right now it looks like it's stage 0 because it looks contained, and somebody will call you tomorrow and go over the rest of your pathology. You can laugh, it's fine, because I was like, what? I have to wait till tomorrow?
I'm just thinking, no, I don't really think that's a good option. I just that just seems insane. Just that you get this information. It's bad. It's hard enough that you started getting ideas by reading it yourself. And
Mhm.
I mean, which of course most of us would do um, if we have access to it, right? And then instead, yeah, that's just I can't even imagine. So what that was a long 24 hours, right? Because at this point you
Well,
don't
and
really
in
know.
right, and within that period, I so I was told that this lady was going to call me, who was a nurse navigator, and so she was going to be calling me to go over the pathology and kind of the next steps. But they actually told me, "Don't call her today. She'll call you tomorrow." Like, because I'm sure people would like to know the answers sooner, so they preempted that and said, don't call her yet. She will go over all of that with you." And in the meantime, I was told that I'd also hear from the breast surgeon so that I could schedule an appointment for a consultation. And I actually heard from them that day. They called me and scheduled an appointment. And mind you, I found out March 10th is when I talked to somebody. They were scheduling me for a consult with the breast surgeon on March 31st, which felt like a lifetime
Yeah.
when I heard the date. And then I had friends that knew I had to have the biopsy and that I would probably have results, and they were asking me what I had found out, right? And so that 24-hour period was a lot of conversation too, because my best friend knew and she had asked me, "Hey, did you get your results?" And I had just texted her back and she immediately called me and we were talking, and she has experience with some family members who had gone through breast cancer, and so she was trying to help kind of navigate some of that. And I had another friend who has some friends who've gone through it as well, and they had given me contact information for one of them. And so I was talking with her, who had also, she's on the kind of, she'd gone through all those steps already, right? And she was in a different spot than I was and was trying to help navigate, but then it became too much information.
Sure. Yeah.
So then it became kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, I can just imagine. And at this point, it is even if it is experience speculative information, it's still speculative information because you still haven't
Mm-hmm.
talked to the people that are actually looking at Michelle's results, right? And so there's yes, it's people are being helpful and trying to comfort you and trying to give you some guidance, but you still haven't really met to know even what you're really dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you did finally meet with them, did you actually talk to the nurse the next day?
I did. I
Okay.
did. She called me in the morning. I
Okay.
called and left a message because I was given her phone number and I waited to call her the next day. But I did call and asked, I requested if she could talk to me in the morning because Adam was staying home in the morning. Like he was able to stay home for a little bit. And so I was asking her if it was possible to talk with Adam there. So I had another set of ears and he could also be a part of that conversation. And she did. She called me back and in the time frame that I asked, and Adam was able to be there and we were able to actually have a conversation all together.
And so at that point, and again, that's just the preliminary. You still got to wait 3 more weeks to meet with the surgeon, to consult for the surgeon. What was the initial information that she was able to give you at that time?
She was very hopeful. She said that the way that things stood, from what they knew, right, that it was contained and that I would be considered stage 0 and that I had good markers and my tumors were hormone positive, which is better, is what I've gathered. And so they can, because I think they can do some, I'm not a doctor, right? But from what I understand, I think because they have things they can do if they're hormone positive. So she's just encouraging and saying there's a lot of good things here. Like I know this isn't a good situation, but there's a lot of good things here. And she broke down what the path was going to be in terms of I would need to see an oncologist, I would talk to the breast surgeon for consultation. I would probably talk with a plastic surgeon for consultation. And then she also said that I met criteria to get genetic testing, and they would recommend that I also do that. So she kind of laid out these are the things that we're going to be doing, which was nice because it was nice to have more of a plan and things I could do.
Yeah. Well, and I would think just I would by her being able to give you some of a protocol, obviously it helps to not know you're doing this alone or you've never,
Mhm.
other people have been through this, right? And there's an
Mhm.
actual protocol with it. When they, and I apologize for not knowing this, but when they say good markers, what does that mean? What does good markers mean?
My understanding is that it's less aggressive
Hmm. Okay.
and that they this is an odd statement, but I've heard it. Good cancer. This idea of good cancer because I think they can do more with it. Like there's more hope and more intervention is my understanding.
Okay, gotcha. All right. And so you have these first preliminary meetings, you have these other meetings set up. Yeah, well, let me ask this. Had there been anything in your life or in Adam's life up to this point that had been any like had the gravity of of a cancer diagnosis?
Well, I don't think to the same extent, but I had another medical adventure in 2023 and into 2024 where there was this period of time where they thought I had a disorder that could have an increased risk of aneurysms and stroke, which was also terrifying at the time when they thought that that was the case. So, in that period of time when I didn't know what it ended up being, that was also a time of I can't do anything and I have no idea what's going to happen.
Sure.
It ended up not being that,
Okay.
but being in the moment of believing that that might be it and I might have this increased risk of these pretty severe medical emergencies happening. Um,
Yeah.
but beyond that, I don't think so. I can't think of really anything else that would equate.
Gotcha. The reason why I ask is I think, just recently my mother, who's 80 years old, going to be 81 next month, she had stumbled. She was outside doing some yard work, and she had stumbled and she fell and she fractured her wrist. And kind of like it was a good fracture, as they said, because nothing was dislocated. There clearly was a fracture, but there was nothing out of place. There was no dislocations. And they were gonna, have her in a soft cast for a week, and then another hard cast for like an additional 4 weeks. And even though from that standpoint, the prognosis and the treatment of it was probably as minimally invasive as it could be under, with a fracture, this was the first time in 80 years my mother had ever experienced any type
Mhm.
of broken bone or fracture. And
Mhm.
so it that in itself seemed to have a weight on her because it was the first time that she had experienced that. And I think of like sometimes we'll be in our 30s or 40s or maybe even later, the first time that we like experience our own mortality, our this
Mhm.
idea of like how precious life actually is, right? And
Mhm.
and I mean we as therapists, as a general rule, we see it on a regular basis, but on the other side of the couch, right? On the other side of the room
Mhm.
is usually where we see it. And that's not to say that we don't empathize with individuals and walk with them as they're going through that. But then when it's happening within our own circle, um,
Mhm.
I think that, or to ourselves, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
We start seeing things, maybe we have the opportunity to possibly see things differently.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so tell us a little bit, about those initial stages. Then you start meeting with the oncologist and the surgeon, as well as the plastic surgeon, and how are things unfolding during this time period, and how were you doing with it during that time period?
Mhm. I think it was easier when I was busy, right? So when I had all of the things I could do because I had some control there, right? Where hey, you need to see all these people, you're going to get these appointments scheduled, you're going to go to them, you're going to get information. That felt easier, I think, than the waiting period between I've done all the appointments and now I'm just waiting for surgery. And that
Mhm.
was 5 or 6 weeks that I had this period of I've done everything and I can't do anything else really beyond waiting and living life. Um, when I and it's unknown anyway. Even when I went to my appointments, because they only know so much, right? The only thing they had to work off of was my initial pathology, and then I had to get an MRI because they wanted to try to see as clear of a picture as they could. And I met with my oncologist, and he had said, my first meeting with him, he was very hopeful too, and was hopeful that I was in such that I was stage 0. I was in the earliest space you can be in. And he was very hopeful he even used the word like cured. We can cure this. And continued to tell me the ifs though, right? It was, well, if it's this, here's what will happen if we have to do everything, if we have kind of the worst case scenario that I envision us having. And so it was, if you have, because they had thought based on my MRI, because there was a space that they couldn't see clearly. It was too dense for them to really see what was going on. And so they kind of went off the assumption that I would get upstaged to at least stage 1 because they assumed that something probably had broken out and wasn't contained anymore. And so he had said, I don't want you to be surprised if that's what happens. And then he continued to just explain to me the ifs, if it's invasive, if it's in your lymph nodes, this is what we'll do, this is what we'll consider chemotherapy, we'll be considering radiation, we'll be looking at medication for 5 to 10 years. So it was a lot of ifs, so it was still a lot of
Okay.
unknown and not knowing what was really going to happen because they wouldn't know anything clearly until surgery came.
Okay. And so in your case, when my dad was diagnosed with cancer, they in his case, they had, and I want to say his was stage 3 at the time that they detected it,
Mhm.
and he had to do chemo and then potentially was going to try to do radiation before they were going to do the surgery. And
Mhm.
so in your case, it was going to be surgery. Was that exploratory surgery or was that surgery to remove the cancer?
It was surgery to remove the cancer, because it was because you're right. Like I've obviously gotten an opportunity to talk to a lot of people, at least in the breast cancer realm, who've had very different treatment plans. Um, because it's contained. So my diagnosis is called ductal carcinoma in situ, which means there's cancer in the ducts that it stayed in the ducts. And so they didn't see anything outside of there. And so they wanted to remove all of it before it could break out and become invasive if it wasn't already invasive. So the idea was to remove everything so that they could to take it out so it wasn't spreading.
Gotcha. So then in this case, and again, this is the question for because not knowing.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
if you have detected it, if I understood correctly, the cancer was detected in one breast, right? Or was
Mhm.
it detected in both breasts?
In my case, it was only in one.
Only in one. Okay.
Mhm.
And so does it automatically that then treatment would be surgery on both breasts, or is it can be just contained to is it just assumed that it can be contained to the one breast?
So they so you could have some people, I was not, this was not recommended for me, but some people are able to even just have lumpectomies
Okay.
where they just have that part taken.
Right, right.
But my breast surgeon recommended at the very least a single mastectomy because the space was too big, that she didn't think that it would really be conducive to do a lumpectomy because she assumed she'd have to take a lot of tissue anyway. And so she and the rest of the team, because they all worked together and consulted and conferred together, recommended a single mastectomy because my other side, they didn't see anything concerning. I opted to do a double mastectomy.
Okay. And what was and if you're okay with sharing, if not, that's okay too. But
Mhm.
what made what led you to the thinking or the conclusion of doing a double mastectomy versus just a single?
I This isn't even really that medical based because there's not a ton of support that it makes much of a difference in terms of recurrence. But I was concerned about recurrence because my thought process was that I'm 35 years old
Mhm.
and there's not really any. When I did genetic testing, I have no genetic markers that are known now for breast cancer risk. Um, but I got breast cancer at 35. So my thought was this could just happen. Like, what's to say this isn't going to happen on
Sure.
the other side? And so my thinking was I'd rather take as much breast tissue as we can to hopefully, right, kind of reduce the risk that I have recurrence. What I found out later, and I didn't know because I didn't know to ask, and I hadn't gotten the information, but because I elected to do a double mastectomy, I didn't end up having to take hormone blockers, which is a very big process from what I've gathered and understood. Because there's really the risk, my oncologist wasn't as concerned about the risk of having estrogen and progesterone and going through and flowing through my body because I had chosen to do a double mastectomy.
Okay. So from a post-surgery treatment standpoint, by having a double mastectomy in this case, by electing that, you didn't have to do the hormone blockers
Mhm.
as a prevention
Mhm.
modality, which is not
Mhm.
necessarily what was part of the motivation, but it sounds like you're considering it one of the benefits afterwards.
Yes, yes, because if I were to be on hormone blockers, you go into early menopause.
Sure, sure. which is something that at 35 years old, we'll stretch that out as long as possible, right?
Right,
Yes.
right. And
Yeah.
there's definitely pieces to that, right? My oncologist had explained to me that if he doesn't need to, he thinks the benefit of me not being on hormone blockers is better because estrogen helps with bone health and heart health.
Yeah.
And so he said the risk of taking them, in my case, it would be I have more benefit to not take them.
Sure. Oh, gotcha.
So that ended up working out unintentionally.
Okay. And so March, you said March 10th was when you were first
That's
indicated.
that's when I found out. They say March 7th because that's when I did my biopsy, but I found out March 10th,
Okay. And then the surgery was, when was the surgery?
May 13th.
Wow. That's a long, it seems like to be a long 2 months. I just,
It felt like that, Kevin.
yeah.
I remember going to see my plastic surgeon for an appointment, and I did not know when surgery was going to be yet. I had done all the appointments, I had done all the things that I needed to do, and I had been talking with my nurse navigator and talking about how the next step would be scheduling surgery and that the hope would be maybe mid-April. And that's what I had in my head. And so I went to see my plastic surgeon in the beginning of April, and the nurse didn't know that I didn't know the date yet. And she had said, okay, well, they'll call you about surgery May 13th. And I must have had a very visual reaction to that because she said, oh, well, I'm sorry. Is that too soon? And I said, no, that is too far. And and she's like, I'm sorry, we can't get you any sooner. And then I had a conversation with my nurse navigator because to me that was worrisome just because there's this month and a half more now that we're to me without knowing a lot of information about how it works being nervous, right? About is this gonna is this gonna get bigger? Is it now gonna break out? Are we gonna be looking at something different? And she again, she's very helpful in this process. She was reassuring and had said, I really think whatever is there is going to be there by then, and it will be whatever it is now. And so that was comforting. And she also, I don't know if this is a um, requirement for nurse navigators, but the nurse navigator that I had also went through breast cancer. And so she was able to speak to kind of the process for herself and kind of the feelings. And she really related to having the feelings of waiting and being in the unknown and the holding patterns.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I know for me, I had hip replacement surgery earlier this year, and I, clearly I waited too long to have it happen and to have the surgery. And then it became a situation where it almost like because of discomfort forced it. And I was fortunate enough that a friend of ours helped get me into a surgeon for a consult earlier, but then it was going to be another 4 to 6 weeks for the actual. It
Mhm.
was another 6 weeks for the insurance to be able to approve it and get everything set up and all that. So it was like I had um, kind of like to your point, it's like speeding in between stoplights and and feeling like we're not moving anywhere. And so yes,
Mhm.
I can just imagine what that must have been like. So then you have the May 13th, you have the double mastectomy May 13th. And yeah, and then the reconstructive surgery isn't, you have to have a healing time period afterwards. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, what was that? When was the reconstruction and what was that space in between like? Because now when you come up post surgery, post initial surgery, then you now know more information about what actually was going on. Yeah, what was that stage like?
So I had my double mastectomy. They also placed what are called tissue expanders, which is to help begin the process of reconstruction, at least in my case. And so surgery ended up being over 8.5 hours. Mind you, I've never had surgery before, right? So this is my first surgery ever. And it ended up being 8.5 hours. And part of that was also just because my breast surgeon was very thorough, which I appreciated. Because I found out obviously after that she continued to take pieces and have them checked to see if the margins were clear. And she ended up having to, because when I came out of surgery and was able to actually have a conversation with her, she laid that out for me, and she talked about how she had to shave off, this is her wording, shave off part of my muscle and part of my some adjacent fat tissue to get clear margins for how big and the location of the tumor. And that they didn't know yet what they didn't know what any of the tissue really looked like yet because they had to do pathology still. But hearing that after, I was thinking, well, okay, we must be, to me, like we must be going to be upstaged, right? Like they must be right because they're talking about how extensive this was. And she was able to tell me preliminarily that I didn't have any lymph node involvement, which was obviously positive. And then I stayed in the hospital the night overnight, and then I got to go home. And then it was just the process of healing, and waiting for the final pathology, which ended up coming back that everything stayed contained. Like I didn't get upstaged. I got to stay stage 0, and they confirmed that they didn't see anything in my lymph nodes. And then it was meeting with my plastic surgeon regularly because now that I had these tissue expanders, once I was healed enough, then they had to start filling them with saline because they had to stretch my skin to prepare for reconstruction. And I did that for a little bit, and then just had the stage 2 of reconstruction, which was it's called exchange surgery. So they took my tissue expanders out and put in implants. And that was on September 9th. So I'm just about a month out from having done that process.
So then, so then that implies that there's going to be there's another stage, another process, not stage, but another process.
I don't have to do anything else if I don't want to, right? There's some other pieces that are a bit more like aesthetic and cosmetic if you want to do those, but
Okay.
there's nothing that's this is automatically what we do.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. And so from May to September, obviously there was follow-up appointments, there's getting more information.
Mhm.
Yeah, where are you at mentally, emotionally, physically? Yeah, where were you at during that window of time?
Well, physically, so I have been restricted from lifting anything over 5 to 10 pounds since I had surgery in May. I have a 2-year-old, mind you, so so I'm not picking up my 2-year-old. Uh,
Well, so it's not, your 2-year-old isn't 7 pounds.
he's not. No, he's not. Probably about 30.
Yeah.
And so so I haven't been able to pick him up. Like we've come up with creative ways, like, I'll get on the floor so he can sit with me, or he climbs up and sits with me, but I can't I can't lift him. I still can't lift him. I haven't been cleared to lift anything heavier than 10 pounds yet. Um, I haven't been able to, I can walk, but I can't do a lot of other exercise. I can't run. Obviously, I can't lift weights really. So that's kind of halted. Um, so physically, that's different, right? That's a change in what I would normally be able to do. Um, in the healing times of both my surgeries, I've had periods of time where I wasn't allowed to drive. So I've had about 10 weeks this year where I wasn't allowed to drive a car. Um, so I was homebound, or people had to chauffeur me around to get to places. Mentally, I think I'm in a better spot because I know, right? I know the plan, I know where we're at. I think the hard part on this side of it, for me at least, is it what might come next, right? Like, because there's a my oncologist. I met with him actually not too long ago, and he was saying the first 2 years after a diagnosis are the highest chance of a recurrence, which is why I will follow, like, he's going to follow me closely. And I think that's the piece, right? Is the hope that there's just nothing else, the hope that there isn't any other thing that pops up or that they find something else.
Mhm.
So that's probably the mental game now, is just trying to move past that and not worry as much about it.
Um, and so the preliminary marks, or not marks, but preliminary information that you have right now at this point is
Mhm,
that the cancer was contained. They
mhm.
removed all the cancer in the tumor, and then anything that might be surrounding it, that was, as you said, shaved off. And so right now, if you did blood tests, there would be should indicate no cancer.
Yes, I'm considered cancer free. Hmm.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
So there was I was listening to Mel Robbins, one of her podcasts. She had a Harvard psychologist named Dr. Ellen Langer. I don't know. Have you heard that name?
I haven't.
I'll send you her episode. So you could check it out. But there was something that she said, and I made me think of you just as we were talking. She talked about this idea of about positive thinking and
Hmm.
about our minds have the ability to help us be sick,
Hmm.
or our
Hmm.
minds have the ability for us to heal, right? And she said something interesting, and I'll just throw this out and get your thoughts. She said, why do we, when it comes to cancer, why do we use the language of saying that we're in remission? So her point was, we don't say if you have a cold or the flu that when you're symptom free, that your cold's in remission or your flu is in remission, you no longer have a cold, you no longer have the flu. Now, she goes, it's probably that we want to have people not surprised if they get a cold again. But if you have the mindset, her point is, if you have the mindset that you are now cold free, then you may actually live accordingly to being cold free versus worrying about getting a cold again.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that's her point about, like you said, you are cancer free.
Hmm.
You're not in remission from cancer, but you're free of cancer.
Hmm.
And it could come back, like you could get a cold again, but it most likely would not be breast tissue cancer because there's no breast tissue. But it would not be it, it would be different. It would be something different that you would deal with it at that time.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts about Langer's comments about being cold free versus a cold being in remission?
Hmm. I think, well, first, just to clarify, because I learned this in this process, they can't take 100% breast tissue
Hmm.
because they can't necessarily guarantee they have, because breast tissue spreads into like surrounding areas. And so they've told me they've taken 95 to 99% of it.
Okay.
Right? So there's still like a lingering amount somewhere in there. But to the point, I think that makes sense when you talk about positive psychology, right? When you talk about this idea of kind of speaking out the gratitude or the hope or the, like, this is where we are now, almost like in my, when you were talking about that, it makes me think of the being present, right? And being in this moment. This is this is where I am, right? In my case, right? In this moment, I'm cancer free, right? In this moment, that's how it is. And I have no idea because some of this, obviously there are moments where my brain, right, can get the best of me, if you will, and then I have to challenge some of those thoughts just because I think that's a natural process. And some of the things that I would do would be things like, you know, especially on the unknown, like, well, I don't know anyway. Whether I had cancer or not, I don't know what happens tomorrow, right? And so some of that thinking had helped me through some of the unknown times too of, well, I don't everybody's kind of in the same boat to some extent. Like I just have more information right now than the next person, right? You know, you can get in a car accident tomorrow and there was no way you would have known that ahead of time.
Yeah.
I just
And
happen to know a little
yeah.
bit more.
Well, and you had this experience, which it's not a, I take her stance on that. And again, I have to, I've only had it in my thinking for a couple days. So,
Mhm.
to think that all the way through, but it isn't to deny what you've experienced or
Mhm.
minimize what you've experienced. But I think this idea of in our world, there's so much energy spent on worrying about future aspects based upon previous information that it's almost like instead of manifesting positive, we almost manifest negative things that happen as well, right? And
Mhm. Mhm.
and so, but I think even if coming from a stance of right now, I know that I'm cancer free based upon the information that I have, the information that you have, doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily um, stop you from doing all the follow-up stuff that you know
Right.
is medically, important to do. And I know that for you, the idea of this was all discovered through like early detection, right? Going through, some early detection stuff. So maybe talk a little bit about
Mhm.
the importance of that and the message you want men and women and men to hear about that.
Mhm. Because like I had said before, I'm not in the age, and I'm still obviously not in the age where mammograms are recommended, right? Mammograms are recommended when you're 40. So that would have, and something my nurse navigator had told me too was she said, I'm glad that you listened to your body and to yourself. She said, because we would have a very different conversation if you had waited until you got your regular mammogram screening at 40. Because that would have been obviously 4 and some change years down the road.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big thing for me, at least, has been I'm glad that I listened because it could have been so easy to not, right? Like I noticed small discrepancies, right? I noticed like I didn't have any actual lumps that were things you could feel. There was no actual lump there. Um, it was just a this seems different. It was just a the the density of my breast tissue seemed different to me, and that could have easily been dismissed, right? Like I could have easily said, "Oh, I've had 3 children. I'm getting older. I could have found lots of reasons to not listen to that. Um, but being aware of that, right? Being mindful and trusting your intuition or trusting your higher power or trusting whatever, right? Whatever you spiritually believe in to listen to like something seems off and I should probably just check.
Yeah. I think Michelle, that in itself is so important in so many different things, right? Physically,
Mhm.
psychologically, something is off, right? And that off is off our what was the normal baseline. And
Mhm.
instead of, like you said, minimizing it, I've had three babies, I've had, these different reasons, it's better to find out and
Mhm.
push to find out than to just leave it alone and as they would say with injuries, oh, just rub dirt on it and just back in there. And
Mhm.
and especially being a mom of three, married, a professional, it would be easy to just get busy and to ignore that prompting or that conviction of, okay, something's off my normal. And
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
glad you listened. I'm glad you were willing to share your story, because it sounds like as you shared your story and are sharing your story, now more people, it gave them permission to share their story as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, Michelle, if there was anything that you would want the listeners to hear, what would be something that you would want people to want a message you'd want them to hear?
I think my biggest takeaway from my journey is advocating and listening, right? So if something seems off and it's different, like to what you had said, if it's different than your norm, right? If this seems off to you for whatever reason, like I don't think it hurts to ask, right? And to ask the questions. And something that is not a part of my specific journey, I had the good fortune of not experiencing this, but something that when I started talking more about what I was going through, lots of people know people who have gone through breast cancer, right? And so I was either hearing people's stories or stories of people that they knew, and there was a unfortunately more than I would like there to be of people being dismissed by professionals too. You know, going and being told you're too young. That's not anything. That's not something to worry about. So still advocating, right? If you feel something is off, it's okay to go ask for another opinion, right? It's okay to continue to advocate for yourself and to ask the questions. And if you need to ask another person, then go ask another person, right? Go ask two people, get three opinions. I don't know, right? Whatever you feel like you need to do, but not being afraid to do that. Because there have been stories that I've gotten the privilege of hearing of people feeling like something was off and they went to two or three different doctors before somebody really listened to them. And then they found out that they were right in their feeling.
Yeah. Well, and I think, we were just talking about this yesterday at church about that prompting
Mhm.
that we get. And usually for me, and I talked about this a few weeks ago, that prompting is not something that I want to do. It's usually
Mhm.
something that I don't want to do, but it doesn't go away. And
Mhm.
that's usually when it's probably in my best interest that I follow through.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
and to just check it out. And if it ends up being negative, and everything's cleared, okay, now I know everything's cleared. And it's better to know that than something's not, in your case, that by being able to find out at such an early stage, then your treatment of it was able to have a greater possibility of success, and
Mhm.
which you've had, and then the recovery is easier too. So
Mhm.
well, Michelle, I'm grateful for you, as I always have been since I've known you, and grateful for that you reached out and wanted to share your story. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for letting me share, Kevin. I appreciate you having me.
And if anyone, not only just during this month of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but of anybody who might benefit from to listening to Michelle's story, please share this episode with them, and trust that intuition, trust that prompting, and to follow through. Worst case scenario, that it would be, it may end up coming out clear, but at least then you'll know that is, and if it's something, then you'll be able to start working toward that. As
Mhm.
always, thank you for being here, and I look forward to being with you next week.